This is the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial. This is the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast on the internet on Sunday, the 12th of January 2025. This is the edition that we'll be examining today's London Sunday Times front page story about Bangladesh. Hand back to us any robbed homes given to minister, says Bangladesh leader. This is an investigation. This print edition of the Sunday Times has relegated the item from being the page one lead to the second item on page one of the Sunday Times, 12th of January. January 2025, issue number 10,452, and the cover price £4.50. This item, labeled investigation by the Sunday Times, has got a list of contributors that I shall be reading. So the list of contributors is called Reporting Team: Gabriel Pogrand in London and Dhaka, Manu Midolo, Zulkarnain Sair, Daisy Ailif, and Dipesh Gadar in London, Muqtadir Rashid and David Bergman in Dhaka. Now, the Sunday Times is shy because despite the fact that this is a very heavily bylined item, it doesn't have any real, factual, contextual, historical narrative about Bangladesh itself, the state of Bangladesh. And most certainly, it has got no trace in it, in the piece, or in the two pieces, of anything to do with the boast made on the Sunday Times, by the Sunday Times, attributed to the Pakistani-born Christian Anthony Mascarenhas. Anthony Mascarenhas boasted hundreds of times while he was alive that it was who had created the movement for Bangladesh internationally, with his piece published by the Sunday Times about dead bodies he claimed were those of the victims, Bengali victims of the massacre, he said, committed by the Pakistani army in 1971. Research by various scholars, students of history, has shown that Mascarenas lied, that the Sunday Times published a lie and blamed the wrong people and denied recognition to the actual victims who were not Bengalis at all. So we shall go into those details another time. But this one today has got the highlight. City Minister Tulip Siddiq is facing an inquiry into her links to the deposed Bangladesh regime of her aunt. Angered by the affair, the country's new leader tells the Sunday Times that vast sums have been siphoned out of his country and he wants answers. And these transactions are dated from starting from 1999 up to May 2016. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are mainly connected to offshore accounts. 5 Bangladeshi-linked offshore firms set up in 1999. One, Harbarton SA, later lent $125,000 to another, Pedrock Ventures. In November 2000, Pedrock Ventures buys flat in Hampstead, London. On January 11, 2005, Harbarton SA is dissolved. The next, Pedrock transfers the flat. The next day, Pedrock transfers the flat to Moin Ghani. On the 12th of March 2009, Moin Ghani transfers the flat to Tulip Siddiq's sister, Azmina. And December 2012 to May 2016, Siddiq and husband live at the property, listing it as their address. Between these dates, Siddiq's sister later sells it for £650,000. And there is a picture of Muhammad Yunus, who is described as interim leader, has vowed to recover cash stolen from the country under the previous regime. So what we are looking at in this particular piece is not the history of Bangladesh, nothing to do with the way that Sheikh Hasina came to power, or anything to do with the opposition. Currently, the opposition party, the largest party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or the role played by anyone other than the Sheikh Hasina's claimed family in the creation of Bangladesh. No examination of the lack of constitutionality, lack of democracy, lack of transparency at all during the period from the return to Bangladesh via India of Sheikh Hasina's father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in January or early January 1972, up to the 15th of August, when he was murdered along with most of his children and family except Sheikh Hasina and Sheikh Rehana. Both of them were, significantly, they were abroad. The events of the 9 months of 1971 have not been mentioned. The fact that the Pakistan Army, the military, on the 16th of December 1971, surrendered to the Indian Army, not to anything to do with the Bangladesh Liberation Army or Bangladesh Freedom Army whatsoever. All of these things are very significant. Why? Because the protests that led to Sheikh Hasina's eventual flight from Bangladesh on the 5th of August 2024 were to do with what happened in 1971 or what didn't happen in 1971 or what didn't happen towards 1971. There was no declaration at any stage, no declaration whatsoever at any stage in 1971, let alone before 1971, let alone before the election that was supposedly to be held in September 1970, but was held in December 1970 due to the cyclone that affected the then East Pakistan. There was no declaration in any shape or form whatsoever recognizable constitutionally, legally, that what is now Bangladesh was going to be Bangladesh, and that the people of then East Pakistan were going to be consulted as to whether they wanted East Pakistan to become Bangladesh, East Pakistan to be a separate state. What the Awami League actually did in 1966 was to publish its 6-point program in which it talked about autonomy. It talked about autonomy in a contradictory way, but it did not mention independence, let alone military fight for independence of a state called Bangladesh. So the Sunday Times article of today, 12th of January 2025, is a very partial, very incomplete, very inadequate account of what is happening, what has happened. Because the protests in 2004 were about the allocation of civil service jobs, preferentially to descendants of those who took part as the freedom fighters in 1971. And it was a movement that began as being a protest against quota. And the protesters were potentially likely to be affected because most of the people in Bangladesh are not descendants of anyone taking part in the freedom struggle, armed freedom struggle. First of all, there was no actual consultation, there was no actual referendum, there was no way that anyone could have the option to take part or not. So the participants in 1971 so-called liberation were participants that were actually trained and guided by Indians in Indian territory. All of these came to a head when Sheikh Hasina described people protesting against the preferential allocation of quotas for the so-called descendants of the 1971 freedom fight as collaborators with the Pakistan Army, which is impossible. Anyone who expressed any opposition, any differing opinion to what Sheikh Hasina's regime was saying was deemed as collaborators. And that incensed people in the most vitriolic, in the most intense way in the last few days. In the last few days, before Sheikh Hasina was forced to flee out of Bangladesh on the 5th of August 2024. And that's the core of the issue that the Sunday Times failed. The other thing the Sunday Times has done is a contradiction of extreme revulsion, because it says that the Hindus are not being protected in Bangladesh today. That's a lie. Hindus are being protected in Bangladesh. Hindus have not been targeted by the people who opposed Sheikh Mujib's daughter and who destroyed the mausoleum at 32 Dhanmondi in Dhaka that Sheikh Hasina erected in memory of Sheikh Mujib. So we shall be talking about all of those in other editions. This one is also not talking about the angle that the other Flea Street newspapers have taken in the last few days, including the fact that Keir Starmer was being guided, led, driven effectively by an agenda set up by Sheikh Hasina. And it was Sheikh Hasina whose agenda was complied with by the Labour Party in letting Tulip Siddiq become a candidate for Member of Parliament. The other thing is that they make a small mention of the fact that the Awami League members or supporters in the United Kingdom have campaigned vigorously for the election or elections at which Tulip Siddiq has become a candidate for the election first to the Camden Council, and then later in the parliamentary election as a member of parliament for Hampstead and Highgate. There is also no mention of the persecution that Sheikh Hasina perpetrated up to the last days in her regime. No mention of the massacres that she ordered and carried out at the behest of India, of valiant Bangladesh army soldiers who took on Indian army on the Bangladesh border. And she committed the massacre of the very valiant soldiers who defended Bangladesh from Indian aggression post 1971. So as I said, all of these items will be followed up in due course. Now this particular edition, just over 19 minutes, is ending at 16:58 GMT on Sunday the 12th of January 2025.